All right, can you all hear me? Perfect. Okay, so welcome to MIST 7770. I am Kareem Jetha. You can call me Kareem from grad school. Um, and so the plan for today is to talk a little bit about what business intelligence is, talk about myself. I'll introduce myself, get a little bit of information from you. And I wanted to do a poll on Zoom, but this morning I tried to set it up, and apparently there was a big Zoom outage worldwide, which prohibited me from, I guess, signing on through the website. So we kind of have to stumble through the part where I try to get some information back from you. But I want to get a sense of what your skill sets are like and what your level of comfort is with the tools that we'll be using in this course. Um, and then I'll go through the syllabus briefly and talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of the course. So that's the plan for today. So with that said, let me make sure that I've got everything kind of set up here. All right. So, about me. So I am not a sort of typical information systems person. I did my undergrad in political science. I finished, I guess, at Emory in 2007. I was recruited to debate at Emory. I was on the debate team. And my plan was to go through, debate in college, and then go to law school and then become a litigator. And that's kind of the track, right, for debaters. But what ended up happening was I went to law school 2012, or I graduated in 2012, I guess I should say. I started in 2008. I did work in corporate law, business law, and software licensing. So I wrote some of those long contracts that you scroll through before you install a piece of software, and then you click accept. Without reading, I wrote some of those, which is, I guess, the only thing more painful than reading them is writing them. And then I did a 4-year JD MBA. So that's kind of where I started my business education. And I finished that up in 2012. And if you recall, 2012 was the year that analytics hype really took off. So in 2012, the Harvard Business Review dropped their data science is the sexiest job of the 21st century cover. There was a whole special issue on data science and analytics. And kind of from there on out, 2012, starting in 2012, that's where all of this stuff really exploded. And so that was kind of a natural decision point for me since I'd finished my JD MBA that year. I took the bar that summer. I'm a full on lawyer, but I decided to stay at Georgia, do 5 more football seasons, and do this PhD in information systems. So that's kind of how I got my information systems background. And I did my PhD at Georgia. I left Georgia for a few years, went to Miami for 2 years, taught at FIU. Miami wasn't for me, though. I like to say that the Venn diagram of people that like Athens and like Miami, it's just one person in it, and that's probably Mark Richt. And he's rich enough to be able to really enjoy Miami. I was not. But I came back 2019 to take a position at University of Georgia in the Terry College. And I, love Georgia, love Terry, and hope to not immediately, and certainly not due to COVID, but eventually die in the city of Athens, Georgia. So that's kind of my academic and professional history and how I ended up back at Georgia, and kind of how I got to where I am. So, like I said, we can't do kind of an easy way to answer these questions, but I do want to get a little bit of information back from you. So some of these questions you can't really, there's no good way to answer, but can anybody shout out if they are in a program other than MSBA? I have just MSBAs here, or is anybody on any other program? Or chat. MSAI. Okay, that's the artificial intelligence program. Oh, we got some MBAs in here. Okay. All right. So a couple of MBAs and then the AI program. Perfect. So how many of you have used Tableau before? There's a few hands going up. Not a lot. Okay. That's good to know. So Tableau is it's a piece of visualization software. Power BI in the chat. Power BI probably a little bit, or Tableau is probably a little bit easier to use than Power BI. Power BI is, I think, as of recently, more widely adopted than Tableau. The problem is that you require Windows computer to run Power BI, and many of you have Macs, so it's harder to teach in an academic environment. But otherwise, Power BI would absolutely be a part of the course. That's Microsoft's version of a similar competing product. But Tableau has been around. It's a bit more mature of a product, and it's a visualization product. So you can sort of imagine a pivot table in the sense that you're kind of dragging data into a workspace and generating visualizations very quickly and easily. So it will be many of your first time with Tableau. That's great. It's a very easy to use piece of software. And I think that it'll be a starting point to a lot of off-the-shelf business intelligence suites, including likely Power BI at some point in your professional lives. What about writing code? Let's see. Let's do maybe a show of hands or something like that. How many of you have experience with writing some kind of code? I guess a lot of you who are MIS majors, you've taken the Java class, you've done NetApps, right? But some of you, okay. So what we'll do for the second half of the course is we will work in a piece of software called R. And R and Python are the two biggest kind of, I guess you could call them scripting languages for statistics. And Python, I'm sure everybody's heard of. R it's right up there with Python in terms of what you can do. Utility, they're both open source, they're both free, and you both interact with the sort of statistical calculations using a little bit of code. So it might be your first experience, really writing code. That's okay, particularly those MBA students. I know that MBA students are not likely to be as technical as the MSBAs or maybe the MSAIs, but that's okay. We will do a very sort of a long glide path. We're going to get comfortable in R, so that by the end of the semester we'll be able to do some cool things in R. So that is kind of the plan. So it's good to know how many of you have experience in the software in the past and how many don't. It looks like there are y'all are at around the same kind of level of comfort that my other class is, which is mostly MBAs and Masters of Accounting students. So that means that y'all are going to be at around the same pace, which is great. That makes my life a little bit easier if I can kind of pace both classes at around the same pace. So if you have not ever written code, you've never used R before, my hope is that you're not, you don't have a lot of anxiety about the class. I think that we will gradually get there, and I've taught this class a couple of times in the past, and in my experience, we all get there. We all kind of, it takes a little while. It stretches us. It's a little uncomfortable to get there, once we start. But we do all kind of get comfortable with the writing of the code by the end of the class. So my hope is that we all get there. And if not, I'm happy to help in any way possible. Shoot me an email. We'll schedule Zoom sessions. We'll, whatever I can do to help, I'm happy to do. So what about stats? All of you, I guess, have taken a stats class before. How comfortable are you with stats, your stats knowledge? Some little bits, some nods, which is good. So that's kind of what I expect. I expect that everybody's taken a stats class, but my expectation is that maybe you've forgotten a lot of it. Maybe you haven't used it. You haven't had the chance to use it. And so we will we'll consider, and I think I talk about this later in the slide deck. But I consider us consumers of statistical models rather than people that need to actually learn how the statistics work, right? We're not going to do math in this class, but we will use statistics. So once we get into R in the second half of the class, we will use R to do like a linear regression, a logistic regression, and some other things. And if you have not, you're not familiar with what a logistic regression is, that's okay. We'll talk about it in sort of general terms, and then I will kind of show you, okay, this is what you need to input, and this is what you get as output, and this is how you interpret the output, right? It says this is your, your log odds and your odds ratio, for those of you that know logistic regressions, and then this is what it means. This is how you interpret those things. But we don't care how to actually, what the math is to get that stuff. That's not what this class is about. And then I guess you all are MSBAs, right? For the most part, other than my MBAs and masters in AI. So MSBAs have a whole year full of analytics focused courses in the grad program. So we won't need to get into that. I know that y'all are in for a fun year of learning analytics, starting with this semester, including this class. So that is, it's good to know your comfort level with writing code, and also the extent to which y'all have seen Tableau or some of these other kind of off-the-shelf tools like Power BI, etc. in the past. If at any point you think that I'm going too fast or too slow in the pacing of the course, like sort of on the big picture, like I'm not spending enough time in Tableau, or if I'm not spending enough time kind of getting comfortable with the syntax in R, just let me know, because especially now that we're on Zoom, and I do appreciate that I can see everybody. You don't have to show me your face if you don't want to. There's lots of good and normal reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. But it's nice that I can kind of see, I can kind of tell when you're tuned out, when you have questions, etc. In the same way that I would in the classroom, because it's difficult to kind of talk into my camera, and Zoom is annoying and it sucks, right? Zoom sucks on your end because you get tired of looking into the camera. It's like the panopticon, if any of you are into that, right? You never know if I'm looking at you or I could be looking at somebody else. So it's kind of exhausting in a way that being in a classroom isn't. It's kind of annoying for me too, because I have to kind of have my teaching energy, but I'm just looking at my monitor and my camera, right? So it's different, but we'll do some things this semester, some on Zoom, some not on Zoom, and hopefully things will work out okay. So any questions about that before we move into what is business intelligence? Okay, so what is business intelligence, right? What is the domain of the thing that we will be talking about in this class? So when we think about business intelligence, there's a lot of things that are sort of threshold steps, or sort of terms that have been used to describe organizational analytics procedures, up until we've kind of come to BI and maybe analytics as our modern terminology. So decision support systems, sort of late 70s, early 80s, we started using this term called executive information systems. And this was and we'll talk about this later in the course when we talk about the history of BI in more detail. But executive information systems, literally, as the name indicates, were only used by executives in firms, right? This is when computing technology was not widely adopted across the firm. So they were only really able to be used by executives because nobody else had computers. OLAP is another kind of step in this iteration. Dashboards and scorecards, which were kind of a part of each of these different kinds of systems. And now we have business intelligence, which was a term that was popularized by a Gartner analyst in the early 90s. And there's lots of different ways to think about what BI is. So here is our sort of textbook definition of business intelligence. And so it's a bunch of things, right? Applications, technologies, and processes. It's a lot of stuff for doing a lot of things, gathering, storing, accessing, and analyzing data. And then it's instrumental in nature. So it is designed to help business users make better decisions in their organizations. So if we were in person, I guess I should say that I anticipate that at some point in the next couple of weeks, we might have to go fully online. We'll talk about the plan and whatnot later in this call. But if we were, so in preparation for that, your exams in this class will be open book, open note. You'll take them on your own, just because I anticipate that we might not be, and I don't know, I'm not making an official statement, just making a guess that we might not be in person in a few weeks. But if this were a normal semester, we were in class, your exams were closed book, closed note, I would actually ask you to tell me the definition of business intelligence. I do think it's useful and important for you to know the domain of things that BI entails. Specifically, the fact that this class is mostly focused on that analyzing component. This is essentially an applied analytics class, but the domain of BI in its most kind of broad capacity includes gathering and storing and accessing data, right? We're doing all of these other kind of pre-processing steps before we get to analyzing. And if you've worked with data, then you likely know that the majority of the time that you spend with data is actually in that pre-processing, right? There's as much as 60 to 80% of the time that you spend working with data comes in cleaning it, right? Making it ready to be analyzed in your analytics tools. So you all, I think, will take a database class. If you don't already know SQL, you don't have experience with SQL, I think you'll learn SQL probably this semester. That's where you do a lot of the storing and accessing, right? You write a SQL query, you build a database to store the data, you write a SQL query to access the data, right? All of those things are a part of this process. But in this class, this is mostly an applied analytics class. So what we do is we do that analyzing of the data. However, there are things that we can say about the overall landscape, right? So we can say that there's sort of an input process of taking data and putting it into a data warehouse. And there's all of these kinds of technical things that come in from the what we call the ETL process, the extract, transform, load process into the data warehouse. And then there's all sorts of sort of technical details about the data warehousing environment itself. And then you kind of look at what we do on the far right of this slide, which is that query, analyze, act side, right? That is the analysis side. So when we think about business intelligence as a full landscape, we are focusing on the right-hand side of this kind of Venn diagram system, but there are technical pieces that go into the other, kind of the middle part, the warehousing part, and then the ETL part that we do not focus on in this class. And what we've kind of decided as a unit is that given, the way that different technical tools exist on the market, given the way that we want to build your skills for the kinds of jobs that you all are interested in, that the best way for us to do that in this class is to focus on the analysis portion, which is right there. So the thing to note, right, is that business intelligence is bigger than analysis, but this business intelligence class is really focused on sort of a subset of the kinds of things that are really in the overall definition of BI, though you do get some of this other stuff in, particularly for the MSBAs, which I guess I'm assuming that I'm speaking to most of you, though there are, a few of you that are not in the MSBA program, but in your database class where you will get some of these other elements as well. So that puts it into context of the overall big picture. So when we think about analytics, right? I said this is an applied analytics class. What do we mean when we say analytics? So analytics can refer to just business intelligence, right? In the sense that this is the whole thing, including the ETL process, or it can mean just the data analysis part of business intelligence, or it can mean sort of AI, machine learning, rocket science, quote unquote, algorithms, etc. So when we think about analytics in this class, and for MSBA students, you've had that kind of pre-semester workshop with Hugh and some of our PhD students. You've seen this before, right? You know that there's three kinds of analytics. And if you've looked at this kind of stub of an ELC page that I've started to fill out, you'll see that our course is organized around these three kinds of analytics: descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. And so that is, and so, yeah, I guess the one comment that I have here, I found out last year that there are some practitioners that have created this fourth category. I think that the UNC MBA program, or maybe their UNC MAC program, UNC Chapel Hill though, has been kind of advertising that they do the fourth kind of analytics, diagnostic analytics. This is not a common term, not widely known, but just in case, UNC, they're just up the street, metaphorically speaking, more or less. So if somebody says there's four kinds of analytics, they may be referring to diagnostic. But the big three are descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. And so what does that mean? Descriptive analytics, and I think many of you have seen these slides recently, asks what happened. It is visualization, right? Dashboards, scorecards. And when we think about descriptive analytics, we will likely be looking at Tableau as the tool to think about descriptive analytics. When we think about predictive analytics, we ask the question, what will happen? I want to predict, as the name indicates, what will happen. So we might use a regression. An application of this might be detecting fraud, which is something that, I guess there's maybe no Mac students in this section of the class, but fraud and audit is a big part of using predictive analytics in the accounting field, right? We'll talk about a marketing application that you may be familiar with of predictive analytics in a second as well, right? So lots of different things that we can do with predictive analytics. Now, a lot of our descriptive analytics, especially in Tableau, will be exploratory in nature, right? Tableau is considered an exploratory descriptive analytics software. So the idea is that you are trying to understand what your data says. You're exploring the data using visual descriptions of the data. Here, this is quantitative for the most part, what we're talking about, right? But predictive is confirmatory. So we we make a hypothesis, right? If we go back to the scientific method, we hypothesize using some theories that there is a relationship between, two variables. And then we run a predictive model to confirm whether or not there is or isn't a relationship between those two variables, right? And so in that sense, the kind of task that we're doing is different between many predictive kinds of tasks and descriptive tasks. Descriptive tasks really lend themselves well to exploring the data, exploratory analysis. Predictive analytics really lend themselves well to doing confirmatory analysis. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all predictive analytics is confirmatory in nature, but it is a generalization that holds in many cases. And we'll talk about some exceptions in the next few days. Then finally, prescriptive analysis asks what should happen. And there's two ways to think about prescriptive analysis. The first is thinking about optimization problems. And optimization problems exist in the field of operations management. And they say, okay, there is an optimal solution. Let's say we want to keep all of our plants fed, and we have 3 different kinds of fertilizer that we can use, and our fertilizer comes in different bag sizes. We need to figure out what are the minimum number of bags that we can use to optimally fertilize the lawn, right? This is an example of an optimization problem where there is a prescriptive solution to optimize the lowest number of bags of the different kinds of fertilizer, given the different nutrient needs of the field, right? That would be an example of a prescriptive optimization problem. The other way we can think about prescriptive analytics, and we'll mostly think about it in this way, is how do we go from taking a predictive model, right, and then adding some organizational constraints to it, and then using that model plus those constraints to come up with a strategy that the organization can engage in, right? So in this case, it's not necessarily an optimal solution, but it's saying, okay, this is our recommendation based on the data that we have and the actual real life constraints that exist in your organization. And how do we go from the predictive model to making a prescriptive recommendation? And what should that look like, right? So any questions so far about what we've done? Sort of makes sense to set up the very basic outline of the course. All right. So what I have here next is it's an illustration of the process of analytics. And it's an example that many of you, I think, may be familiar with. So if you've seen this video before, please indulge me as I guess I make you watch it again. But I think that it does a good job of illustrating the kinds of things that we'll talk about. So I should be able to share it with
Studying
sound.
shoppers' habits.
And,
Companies can predict what you want to buy, and sometimes that's a problem. A few years ago, for instance, A father walked into a Target store in Minnesota, clutching an advertisement. He started yelling at the manager. "Did you send this to my daughter?" he asked. The ad contained all these coupons for baby clothes and bottles and formula and cribs. "She's still in high school and you're sending her ads for baby clothes?" he screamed at the manager. "Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant?" The store manager apologized and a few days later called the guy to apologize again. The father was somewhat abashed. "It turns out there's been some activities in my house that I wasn't aware of," he told the manager. "I had a long conversation with my daughter. She's due in August. It turns out I owe you an apology." Target had created a computer model that could figure out which shoppers were pregnant just by studying their shopping habits. Identifying pregnant women is the holy grail of retail. People with new babies are so tired that if you can get them inside your doors to buy bottles and formula, they'll end up buying everything else they need as well. And if a new parent starts shopping at Target, they'll keep coming back for years. So how did Target start marketing to parents before the baby arrived? Lots of people buy lotion, but a Target data analyst noticed that women on Target's baby registry started buying very large quantities of lotion in about their second trimester. Someone else noticed that in about their 20th week, pregnant women started loading up on vitamins. By crawling through the data, Target was able to identify about 25 different items that, when analyzed together, would allow them to predict if someone was pregnant. Target's program was so accurate that it could assign almost any regular shopper a pregnancy prediction score. But the problem with all this data, as the father in Minnesota demonstrated, is that Target couldn't let on how much they knew. After all, shoppers might get a little bit upset if they received an advertisement making it clear that Target was studying their reproductive plans. So how did Target solve this problem? They started mixing in ads for bottles and formula with other products that had nothing to do with pregnancy, like lawnmowers and wine glasses, things that they knew a pregnant woman wouldn't necessarily be interested in. As a result, the baby ads looked random, and it worked. Women started using the coupons, and Target's mom and baby sales exploded. The lesson? Habits matter, and we can either choose to shape our habits ourselves, or we can wait till someone else shapes them for us.
All right. So commonly used anecdote, right? It came out the article that so it was released in a book that became an excerpt of which was published in New York Times Magazine in 2012, which was that kind of the year of analytics hype, right? So how many of you had seen that before, had heard the story before? You like a hand? Yeah, all right. Most of you have, right? So lots of hands. So thank you for indulging me, as I said, and watching it again. And I think that what it shows us is it asks us the question of, or it helps us think about some of the things that we just talked about, right? Descriptive, predictive, or prescriptive analytics. Well, clearly what we're talking about is building a predictive model, which I think was said explicitly, but then thinking about how to transfer the predictive model to a prescription about how to actually engage in marketing, right? Because when you have a predictive model that says this is how you can advertise, this is how you convert these people into high lifetime value customers, what that does not necessarily imply is that doing so is the best prescription given all of the other kind of socio-cultural elements involved in that marketing practice, right? So there's other domains of background knowledge that are necessary in order to move from predictive to prescriptive in this case. The final thing that I have here is like, what are the sources of data that Target would need to create a statistical model? And the thing that's interesting, right, is to think about what Target has that we give Target, like, ourselves, and then what Target can get access to just based on the fact that they're a company in the world, right? And the thing about Target is that they have these registries, right? So if you're having a baby, you can register for gifts, right? You can things that you want your friends and your family to purchase for you. And so in exchange for giving your friends and family the ability to buy the items that you specifically want on your baby shower or whatever it is, you have to give Target some information. So you tell Target when, for example, your due date is, and then Target can build a model using that, what we might call training data, right? where they have your due date because you've given it to them. And then they also might have your shopping habits about when you buy your prenatal vitamins, when you buy your unscented lotion, when you buy your cotton balls, all of those kinds of things. And they can use that information to build the model. Then they can test that model on, a different set of potential customers that did not give Target what their actual due date is, and then they can try to predict their due dates. And that's the practice of analytics. But there are other sources of data that Target can use, and so this text gives us a lot of examples, right? You've got all kinds of demographic information. Are you married? You have kids? What part of town you're in? How long it takes you to get to the store? Your salary? Whether you've moved? What credit cards you have? What websites you visit? That's kind of the demographic information that is linked to your guest ID based on the information that Target definitely has about you. But there's additional information that Target can access if they're interested in investigating certain issues, right? So ethnicity, job industry, magazines that you read, bankruptcy or divorce, where you went to college, when you bought or lost your house, what you look at online, what brands you like, your political leanings, your reading habits, charities, the number of cars you own, right? Target can get a lot of information, or any major corporation can get a lot of information to run these kinds of tests on you, right? So when you take this data and you combine it with all of this other background knowledge, in this case, this is knowledge from maybe the field of psychology about habit formation, and you combine it together, then what you get is a marketing strategy that seems to be pretty effective, right? Particularly now that they've disguised it so that we can't really see when it's happening to us, because otherwise we might get creeped out a bit, right? So that's an illustration of what this class is all about, right? And we'll do this in an applied sense. So we'll do a little bit of descriptive and then a little bit of predictive analytics. That will be kind of the bulk of it. We'll say a little bit, like a few weeks of descriptive, primarily in Tableau, and then the majority of the rest of the class is going to be predictive using R. So what does the class actually teach? Well, we're going to talk about how do you ask the right questions. That's one of the things that we'll talk about in the next week or two, right? One of the things that I think is important is thinking about how we know things. And so if you get a PhD, which I assume that maybe one or two of you might be interested in, but this is not a PhD seminar, right? But if you were getting a PhD, one of the questions that you would ask is a question of what we call epistemology. And epistemology asks, how do we know what we know, right? And if you study epistemology, you have to think about what are the right questions to ask in order to understand your data. And so we might think about what are the right questions when we're trying to do exploratory research versus confirmatory research? How does what we learn from the data change if we're doing an exploratory analysis versus a confirmatory analysis? What is the value of asking a question, making a hypothesis based on theory first before you actually do any actual analysis, right? Those things all matter. And the ability with which you can make actual judgments about what the data says depends on all of those other issues about asking the right questions. So that's what we'll talk about a little bit in the next few days. Then if you look at our ELC page, I think, as I've mentioned, it's organized around descriptive and predictive analytics, but there's that kind of course intro folder at the top. That's this stuff. Then we'll talk about how to do data visualizations, right? How to describe the data, mostly visually. We will talk a little bit about describing the data numerically, right? But descriptive statistics is kind of a thing that y'all have done before, right? You already know the mean and the median and the mode and all of that kind of stuff. That's what descriptive statistics is. And we will talk a little bit about those things because I think it's important to think about when to use the mean and the median, and what is the median in a sort of conceptual sense and things like that. So we will spend a little bit of time on descriptive statistics, but when we think about descriptive analytics, we're mostly talking about visual descriptions, right? So how do we make compelling visualizations of data? And one of the things that I think is particularly interesting is how could you make misleading visualizations to advance your ideological objectives? We'll talk about different ways that you can present data to make a point stronger or weaker depending on what you want to do, right? So this assumes that you have some ideology that you're trying to advance a priori, right? You have some ideology, and then you take data and you're trying to force the data to fit your ideology. There are ways that you can make visualizations that comply with that ideology, which is a fun way to think about, what makes a good visualization versus what makes a bad one. Then we'll talk about predicting outcomes from data. We'll do a little bit of, like we said, statistics using R. We'll spend a little bit of time. There's a bit of a, as you see in the syllabus and the schedule, there's a bit of a glide path where we get comfortable with R before we really dive into it. And then we'll talk about making recommendations about business strategy from data. So what do we not do? Like we've said, we don't talk about data collection, data cleaning, data management, data storage, data querying, access, right? The majority of that you'll handle in your database class, which I believe is advanced data management for MSBAs. So we're not going to do a bunch of math. The way that I think about it is that we are consumers of statistical methods in this class. We don't need to understand how the statistics work. We're just going to use the method. So if, for example, we want to say, okay, is there a relationship between these two variables? We know we'll use a regression. And so we'll say, okay, is there a relationship? Yes. What is the strength of that relationship? It is a very strong relationship, or it is a weak relationship, right? And so we're just going to put in the inputs and learn how to get the outputs back out and learn how to interpret those outputs. But we're not going to worry about how the outputs were created using all of these mathematical functions and things like that. That's for your stats class, or it was for your stats class a year or two ago, which you may or may not still remember. But we are consumers of the methods in this class. So how are we going to do it? Like, what is the ordering? We're first going to talk about summarizing data, forming research questions. Then we're going to go into visualization in Tableau. Then predictive analysis in R, so linear regressions, logistic regressions, decision trees. And then toward the end of the semester, I do want to cover text analysis. So we'll do a little bit of work with text. One of the things that y'all will be able to do by the time we finish this course is you'll be able to download a group of tweets from, let's say, Delta and, let's say, Frontier Air. And you'll be able to convert those tweets into a format that can be analyzed in R, and then you can do a sentiment analysis on that set of tweets. And you can say, okay, look, the tweets from Spirit Air are the sentiment is much more negative than the sentiment of the tweets from Delta, right? Or there's really no difference between the sentiment of the two tweets, the two sets of tweets, right? So you'll be able to do some work using real data, so to speak. And then if we have time, if you look at the bottom of the syllabus, you'll see this is kind of what I call special topics. We'll either do maybe some social network analysis or some very kind of beginner machine learning, also in R. That's if we have time. It's possible that we maybe need to spend a little bit more time doing one or two things as we kind of get comfortable with the syntax. So we may not have a chance, but I'd like to see if we can maybe get one more kind of cool thing in at the end of the semester. But at the very least, we should be doing some text work. And then finally, of course, we'll talk about prescriptive analysis and the two different ways that we can do prescriptive analysis through optimization and through converting predictive analysis into prescriptions vis-a-vis some kinds of organizational constraints. So that is what we cover in this class. The two software tools that we use, Tableau and R. Tableau is sort of a privately, it's like a closed source piece of software. It's expensive to use. I'll have licenses for you. You do have a 1 year long academic license that you don't have to start that trial or that 1 year license if you don't want to, because I'll have semester long licenses for you once we get into Tableau. And then R, of course, is free and open source, so you can use it for free. So any questions about kind of what the course is about, what we're getting ourselves into this semester before I get into the nuts and bolts on the syllabus? All right. So the syllabus is on ELC. I think I attached it to the note that I sent out. Let me share. I think it's going to be kind of difficult to see in this maybe aspect ratio, but at any rate, so I guess the first thing that we'll talk about is the course format. So before I get into what my kind of vision is of what this course is going to be like during COVID times, I guess I'm curious to hear about what your kind of expectations and your hopes are for courses this semester. How many of you are excited or enthusiastic and planning on taking in-person courses this semester? Couple. All right. Yeah. All right. And I assume that if you did not, raise your hand or give me the thumbs up or the wave in chat, what that means is that you are a little bit skeptical about meeting in person, and that's not something that you're super excited about. And those are, sort of the numbers that I'm expecting. And like I said, my guess is that what we will end up moving toward is a fully online semester, but who knows? I don't know. We'll wait and see what happens. The way that I intend for this course to run is that we will use as many methods as kind of we can while we still can. So we want to combine synchronous and asynchronous online delivery. So here we have synchronous or like live online delivery, and we have sort of toward the beginning of the semester, before ad drop, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page about things and do live classes, but also not have them in person, because I'll put together a plan for our online class, or I'll put together a plan for our in-person classes where, we do the social distancing and all of that. Let you know the plan, wait for ad drop to close, and then we can sort of move forward with that to the extent to which we choose to. But I know that Zoom is not great, right? Zoom is there's like Zoom fatigue on your end, right? It's I don't know if you've studied like the panopticon, or you've heard of the panopticon, you know what it is. I feel like Zoom is being like in the panopticon on the student side, because you are never sure who I'm looking at. You feel like you have to kind of be on your game the entire time if you have your screen on, which you don't have to. I'm not one of those people that says you must have your screen on. I think that there's totally good, normal, valid reasons for you not to. But if you have your screen on, it feels like at least when I'm on a Zoom call, I feel like I have to kind of be on all the time, because I never know when somebody is or isn't actually looking at me, right? So if you've studied the panopticon, that's kind of what that is, just in the prison context. And then on my end, the Zoom it's like I have to bring my teacher energy into this place, which is my my office, and I'm just looking at my monitor and a camera, right? So it's hard to kind of keep that energy in a Zoom call while y'all are not my camera on my screen in front of me. So I don't love Zoom. And one way that we can solve, especially the Zoom fatigue problem, is with asynchronous online content. So especially once we get into the hands-on stuff, what I'll be doing is I'll be making tutorials and allowing you to view them whenever you like, right? So you don't have to necessarily log in and log on to Zoom at the same time. You can kind of work through the practice problems, and I'll post the videos on YouTube, and you can follow along whenever you like. And so that's what I envision the majority of the course to be. Now, there will also be opportunities for in-person learning, because this class, if we split it, I guess, in half, then we can meet the guidelines that the Terry College and the university has decided are sufficiently safe, and then we can do in-person group learning. So I will put together the details for that over the next couple of days. And then in the future, if we would like to do that, if any of you would like to do that, I'm happy to meet with you in person. I'm required to, I guess. Whether or not I'm happy to do it is ultimately not relevant. But what I'd like, what I'm asking is that you just you make a pre-registration, right? So if you would like to do any in-person group instruction, you just let me know beforehand, and then I'll make a plan to be in the classroom. Otherwise, my sort of assumption, the baseline assumption, is that we will largely be remote, either synchronous, live, or asynchronous. And in addition, right, if you have additional questions, we can do virtual office hours. We can meet one-on-one. We can meet in small groups on Zoom, etc. But if we want to do in-person group instruction, we can start that starting next week. Just let me know beforehand, and I'll give you. It'll be a Google Doc where you'll have the ability to sign up for in-person group instruction for those of you that are into it. So the other thing is that I will split you up into two groups, which is a requirement for, I guess, contact tracing, because we want to know who's in the Monday group, who's in the Wednesday group, so we can know who's in which group if there's a thing that pops up, which may or may not happen. So that's the plan. That's my kind of vision, knowing that it is possible and perhaps even likely that it changes. And so what I'll do is I will give you more instruction about how to set up in-person group instruction later in the week, and starting next week, you are welcome to just put your name on the list if you want to set things up for in-person. So that's the plan. Does that sound consistent with how the other classes that you're taking are kind of setting things up, or are your other classes required to be in person, or it seems consistent with what else is going on? All right, that's good to hear. So I know that it's weird. I'm sure that you all have heard the same spiel from every professor. It's weird, but we're all going to adapt. We're going to be flexible, blah, blah, blah. It is what it is. But the one thing that I'll say is that if there's anything that I can do to make it, more effective for you, just let me know, because I'm not super used to teaching online. I've done it, once or twice, but it's not a thing that I'm not like an online professor, right? So if there's something that I can do better, just let me know. The next thing that I want to say about the course is that I assigned a textbook, and this is the book. It's called Machine Platform Crowd by Andrew McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson, and I assigned it kind of late in the process, right? Typically, we let you know, in advance when there's a textbook and it's, available at the library and all of that kind of stuff. But this one, I assigned it at the last minute, and I assigned it because for a specific reason, right? There was an email that went around some of the MSBA faculty from the program chair. And what they said was, and this was Santanu, I guess you all know, Dr. Chatterjee. And what he said is that some students are being asked questions about machine learning in their interviews, and that they are not they're not able to answer those questions in a conversational sense. And so he gave some examples, I think 2 or 3 different companies that just asked kind of basic conversational questions about machine learning, and the students were unable or unequipped to answer those questions in those interviews. And so he said, look, we want to make sure that our students are able to answer these questions. We want you to get jobs. We want the program to look good, right? So one of the things that this book will help you to do is to be able to answer those questions, right? So if a potential employer asks you, what can you tell me about machine learning? Chapters 2 through 5 of this book specifically will give you the ability to have that conversation in a conversational sense, right? You'll be able to talk about machine learning sort of in the same way if you've read that Habit book, right? About all of the ways that machine learning is and isn't like human psychology. You'll be able to talk about the ways that the growth of technology has shaped the way that we do machine learning, the types of algorithms that are used, the ways that it can be used in commercial environments, et cetera, right? So the book is very good at helping solve that very specific need, which is a need within the MSBA program. The other thing that the book does, and I know that not all of you are MSBA students, you might not have the same issue. MBA students, I think this might happen to you as well. So, who knows? But I think that this book does a good job of setting up what I call the socio-technical context of business, right? Like especially in the MSBA program, I think it's possible to get kind of lost in the weeds of the analytics without losing or while losing track of the big picture, which is sort of organizations, businesses, commerce, right? All of that big picture stuff. And so this book, I think, will help us keep our eye on the big picture, at least in this course. So the two authors, they're MIS faculty at MIT. The book is not a textbook. It's like an airport book that's designed to be purchased by managers or consultants or somebody like that. It reads like a pop science book, like a Malcolm Gladwell or something like that. It's an easy read. So it's long, like it isn't, it's a pretty thick book, right? But it goes pretty quick. And if you're interested in analytics, if you're interested in technology and the sort of intersection place between business and technology, I think it'll go pretty quick. I think I know everybody says, I hope you actually enjoy the book, but I think that in this one, my hope is that you actually enjoy reading this book. And I think that many of you will. So there are pirated copies online that you can download. I won't tell you how to get them. You can figure that out for yourself. But it is back ordered. The paperback version is back ordered on Amazon if you haven't already got it. The hardcover version is in stock today. So you might need to get the hardcover version if you want the physical copy, not the electronic copy. And then there's electronic copies, like the Kindle copy is $9.99, right? This is not an expensive book. It's not a textbook. And I think it's an enjoyable read. So let me know what you think about it by the end of the semester. But that's the reason why I've assigned it in this class at the last minute. The other thing that I say in this part of the syllabus is that when we do descriptive, I rely pretty heavily on this book called Storytelling with Data. I did not ask you to buy it, but I think it's very good. So a lot of my slides and examples come from this book. I think it's only $20, $22 or something like that. If you like that stuff, if you like the way that they think about data and data visualization, I've given it to you as a reference, and you can buy it if you like. There's also a pirated version on the internet if you want to download it. But again, I'm not going to tell you how to do that. So that's available, and that's where I get some of the stuff from that from the first part of the course. We'll use Tableau, and I'll give you the license and R. And then there's sort of nuts and bolts on quizzes and exams and things like that. So I'll say there will be a couple of reading quizzes about Machine Platform Crowd. Those quizzes will be open book, open note, and untimed. So the idea is you'll pop open the quiz, you'll look at the questions, there may be 5 or 10 questions, and then you'll read the chapters. And then as you read the chapters, you just fill in the answers, right? They're not designed to be tricky. They're not designed to be difficult, just kind of a gentle nudge to keep you on task with the reading. There's going to be 2 midterms and a final. The final exam is optional. So if you take the final exam, it'll replace your lowest midterm. The midterms are going to be open book, open note, because my assumption is that you'll take them remotely. So they will be timed, but you can just take them, on the day of the midterm, you'll have, 75 minutes. You take the exam during whatever 75-minute period you like, and then turn it in by the end of the day. And it'll be open book, open note, but it will be timed rather than untimed like the reading quizzes. And I will ask you to do a couple of group projects. And so I know that group projects are frustrating for all kinds of reasons. You've got to negotiate, different people's, maybe sensitivity to getting a good grade. You got to negotiate different people's schedules, all of those kinds of things. I think that it will be a good exercise to add a group project to a semester that is largely online. However, when I say it will be a good exercise, what I mean is that it will add to the frustration that already exists inherent to doing a group project. So, you'll have to schedule group meetings using some of these collaborative tools. You'll have to kind of figure out how you want to do that. The timing issues will be maybe manifestly even more salient, et cetera, right? So, we'll see how things go. I will have you, do a little evaluation at the end of the semester about it to, give me some feedback about how it went. But I am assigning it in full knowledge of the fact that it might be a little bit frustrating to do the coordination elements of it. But I believe that it is good practice for you to engage in the coordination elements of it in addition to the actual work of the project itself. And the reason for that is so I mentored some MSBA capstone projects last year, and that's when COVID happened, right? So those capstone projects, you all know the capstone part of your MSBA for the, most of you that are in that program, you get assigned to a company, you go in and you try and solve an actual analytics problem, right, in that company, and you go, face to face. You start with them in person. And so, we met with, a couple of my companies. One was in Florida, so we had to go down to Florida, and we met with the company. One was in Atlanta. We went to Atlanta. We met with the company, and then COVID happened, and so we were no longer able to meet in person. The different students within each group were no longer able to meet in person, and then the student group and the company that they were meeting with were not able to meet in person. So they had to coordinate themselves using those online tools, and they had to coordinate with the company and then do their presentations to the company using those online tools. And it was very clear that the students were, there was a difference in their sort of level of comfort and familiarity with coordination and presentation in person versus online. And so this is, I want to push you. I want you to have some practice doing things that are annoying and uncomfortable. But there's a reason for it, right? Because these things do actually come up in real life. And it's good practice to get comfortable doing a sort of professional presentation with like the handoffs and the pomp and circumstance to the extent to which we'll do it. And we'll get into that later when I talk about the final project. But doing the whole thing fully online, I think is a useful thing to have practiced. So the schedule is at the bottom of the syllabus. You can flip through it. You can see that I've kind of spaced things out. In case you don't kind of see what I'm doing here, one of the things that I'll say is that, so for example, the Wednesday before what I guess would be Georgia, Florida weekend or fall break weekend, we kind of have a check-in session. So it's meant to be a light class. Now, in this case, I assume that y'all aren't going to Jacksonville or, traveling much at all. But that Wednesday before fall break is designed to be pretty light. I'm just going to check in with your projects. I don't need the entire group; just one person is fine. But I want to see how things are going. Right? We have another one of those kinds of check-ins the day before the class before Thanksgiving. So the Monday of Thanksgiving break. Thanksgiving that Wednesday is a break day. But I know that many people like to travel and whatnot for that whole week. So that Monday is going to be the other final project check-in day where I meet individually with groups. So if you're not able to make it, that's not a huge deal. So I've kind of set things up so that it flows well with the rhythm of the semester, knowing that some things of that rhythm may or may not still exist. But I don't know. I hope that it works out. If we need to make any changes, if there's, if my midterm is on the same day as two other midterms in your program, I don't mind making some changes. Just let me know, in the next few weeks if there's anything that I'm going to need to do. But take a look at the syllabus, the schedule, and let me know if there's any questions. And I guess I'll open it up if there's any questions or comments or anything like that before we close things out for today. Nothing. All right. So thank you for sitting through the class. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you get some value out of it. Zoom COVID stuff is weird, but I hope that we have a good one. So I'll see you all on Wednesday. We're going to do another Zoom, and then we'll kind of break off into more normal stuff after that. So I'll see you all on the next one.
Thank you.
Yep.